Hello, my name is Mayor Tim Swadley. I'm here today to start a new series called City Council Catch-Up. And we had a meeting on October 11th, 2022, and I'm going to kind of run you through the agenda items so you better understand what's going on here in city government. So whenever we start a meeting, the first thing we do is we have to have a quorum, which is 2/3 of the council members. In our case, that would be 12 members. So the city clerk, after I call the order, does a roll call. After we determine we have a quorum, we get into our agenda. The first item is typically we include the minutes and reports in the packet. If there's any questions, the council members can certainly ask. And these are typically from our committee meetings. Then we go into our public comment. On the agenda, there is a link. So if somebody wishes to speak at a city council meeting, they can click on the link, fill out the form, and they have up to 3 minutes in order to give us their feedback. The next item is communications and presentations. And typically, that would be if there was a staff member or a special guest that wanted to give a presentation of what's going on in their department or any new initiatives we may have. And it could also include communications regarding the events that's happening in the community. The consent agenda are typically items that we approve without much discussion. That might be minutes from the previous council meetings, or in this case, we had items regarding committee appointments, special events license. Oftentimes there's operator licenses for our establishments in the consent agenda. Then we get into our old business and our new business. At the city council meeting, we also had an update from Stoughton Utilities on their budget process. We have some dates here on the slides that kind of explain, and basically what they did at the meeting was they gave an overview of where they're at in the process, what some of their goals and their objectives are going to be as they go through their budget cycle, which is ultimately approved by the city council. We also had a couple items that we considered in the closed session, and those are items that usually deal with personnel issues, or in this case had to do with negotiating with some things that are going on with our businesses or our local residents. So these are some of the minutes that were in the consent agenda. And our first resolution last night was regarding my appointments. That was in the consent agenda as well. And then we also had one in there about the special event, which I had mentioned at Marchand Cidery. And then these were some operator licenses for our establishments that were approved as part of the consent agenda. This was a resolution in old business that had to do with an ordinance. So whenever we do an ordinance change, it typically comes from a committee for their review. Our city attorney generally reviews the ordinance, and then ultimately we use a 2-step process. So the first step would be to introduce it at a city council meeting, and then the second step would be to approve it at the council meeting. So this one in particular, this would be the second reading. The first reading, it was introduced at the last meeting. The second one would be for consideration and approval. And this one had to do with the floodplain zoning. And basically we were updating our ordinance so it was consistent with what the DNR wanted to have. The next ordinance that we approved was also a second reading, and this one was in regards to a lot out at Nordic Ridge. Years ago, when this development was platted out, the city council approved one of the lots to be considered for what we would call a tot lot. As the development grew, the main park was included into the development, and in that park, it was determined that there was really no need for this tot lot because it didn't connect to the main park anyway where the splash pad is. And here's kind of a map here on this picture here that shows where that lot was. So we went through a process where you vacate the lot. So what we basically had to do is go to court and have the city request this lot be vacated. And then once that's approved in the courts, that lot goes back to the original property owner, which in this case was Bob Dvorak. And then what we went through last night also was to rezone this particular lot. So it was zoned as an institutional, which is typically what we zone our parks or schools or churches in, and we wanted to rezone it to put a single-family home there. So then ultimately, that ordinance was passed last night, and that will become a single-family home. And then there was a donation that will be coming to the city from the developer to our Parks Department for the in exchange for the vacation of that property. The next ordinance that we considered last night had to do with a lot on Riverview Drive. And on that particular lot, what they wanted to do is they wanted to create a second lot there for additional building to be installed, and that was approved as well. When we're voting on these ordinances, we have to have a majority vote, which in the case last night, if we had 11 council members, so we have to have at least 6 votes. Typically, we have 12 council members. So we have to have a majority vote. And if there is a tie vote, the mayor actually would be able to cast a tie-breaking vote or not vote at all. So if it was a 6-6 tie, the mayor could vote yes, or the mayor could vote no, or not at all. If the mayor voted not at all, then the motion would actually fail on a tie vote. The next slide here has to do with our clerk's department, and what they've done is they put together an emergency management plan in preparation for our elections. Historically, Stoughton has not had an emergency plan for our elections at our locations, and we were strongly encouraged to do this. So our city clerk, Candy Christian, with help from the deputy clerk, Tammy Nemo, put together this piece and is in the process of training our poll workers to implement this plan for the upcoming and future elections. This document will be fluid. It'll be changed as we grow here in the city and other issues might come to light, but we felt it was important to get something in place given the current environment. They also work with the police department and Dane County to include some items into this plan. The next item came from the library, and the library on an annual basis comes to us, and this is a resolution. The resolution is different than an ordinance. As I mentioned, the ordinance, we have a 2-step process. For approval, the resolution typically is a single-step process, and this one here from the library has to do with if we contribute minimum above the minimum amount of levy from your taxes toward the library, in exchange from the county, we can get a credit in lieu of the property taxes. So we do that on an annual basis here in Stoughton because we do contribute more than the minimum level that is required by the Dane County Library System. The next resolution had to do with our Public Works Department and Stoughton Area Baseball Association, also known as SABA. And SABA was able to secure a grant in order to put new dugouts at Norris Park. The baseball diamond at Norris Park is also used by Stoughton merchants, as well as the high school and other youth organizations such as the Legion. And the dugouts there are wooden, they're in bad shape, they're not ADA accessible, and SABA secured the funds in order to provide new ADA accessible dugouts, as well as having them made out of block, which we think will be more durable and less maintenance-free going forward. The 2 items that we had in closed session last night had to do with the True Hotel. They've challenged their property tax value. And also we had one regarding a family that we have a dispute in on a sidewalk we want to put in and some trees that are impeding our work. So typically when we go into closed session, we introduce the motion to go in there. We have to, by state statute, read the statute for a reason going into closed session. And then once we go into closed session, we do a roll call vote. And then after the roll call vote, we go in and we close the doors and we shut off the camera and we deliberate as a council. And oftentimes in closed session, we will make a decision regarding direction to give our city attorney. And then we can also move to adjourn out of that, which is what we did last night. Thank you for joining me today for the first of the series. And if you have any questions, as always, feel free to contact me at City Hall. Thank you very much.